After finishing second here in the Democratic presidential primary in 2020, Pete Buttigieg joined the Biden administration. And while he did come back here, his job prevented him from being too overtly political. That's not an issue he faces anymore, and he just spent the last 3 days in the Granite State working on behalf of local Democrats. We can also report he connected individually with a lot of his key supporters from that campaign 6 years ago that put him on the map. We spoke one-on-one with the former secretary outside the Puritan in Manchester, where he was campaigning for Chris Pappas. Mr. Secretary, tell us what brings you to New Hampshire.
Here to speak about causes and candidates that I care about, including Chris Pappas, who I think it's so important, both for the Granite State and for the country, that he go to the Senate. He was great to work with in the U.S. House. He has a very focused message about making sure government works for people to make life more affordable, instead of working for the wealthiest people, really serving themselves, as we have seen in this administration, and would see if his opponent is elected to the Senate. I want to make sure I'm doing my part to help amplify that message and doing some listening while I'm here, too. I'm really looking forward to hearing what's on Granite Staters' minds, some of the things that I'm sure are the same and some things that have really changed, not just since years ago when I was campaigning here, but since just a couple of years ago when I was here delivering transportation dollars.
Yeah, speaking of what people are talking about, you've been to Merrimack many times. A lot of people there are focused now on this proposed ICE detention facility going in on Robert Milligan Parkway. You were a former municipal elected official. If you were serving in Merrimack right now, what would you say is the most effective way, and the town opposes this, to oppose it?
Well, it helps if you have leaders who are ready to stand up, as the congressman has, on this issue. We don't see that leadership, of course, from the governor, who seems to be trying to have it both ways. But it's very telling that the local community, including a lot of Republicans, are saying, hey, we don't want this. And I think it mirrors the fact that people across the country are saying, we all believe that it's important to enforce immigration law, but the extremist behavior, the abuses of rights, including of citizens, and this campaign of mass detention have nothing to do with keeping Americans safe or law and order.
You were here in 2022 up in Berlin to talk about delivering funding that was going to provide an innovative way to try to melt some sidewalk snow. Things went sideways a little bit there. Obviously, a lot at work, federal, municipal, commercial. But if Democrats are going to deliver for the working class, don't things have to happen faster than 5 years from something being announced?
You know, I saw firsthand some of the things that stand in the way of projects getting delivered. We were able to complete about 20,000 projects on my watch as secretary, but there are many more that I would love to have been able to see move faster. It's part of why I think we need a more modern approach to the sort of red tape that can get in the way. And I think there's actually an opportunity for consensus and good bipartisan work. I think a lot of Democrats and Republicans agree on that fact.
You were very diplomatic in the administration in terms of the debates at the DNC about New Hampshire's first in the nation status. Granite State wants it back now. Are you going to be on New Hampshire's side and say New Hampshire should go first?
I respect that I am not one of the people who gets to make the rules or make those decisions. What I will say is that campaigning in New Hampshire made me, I think, a better public servant. The conversations that I had, the way that the size, the scale, and the civic spirit of this state really forces people on the national stage to stop and pay attention to things on a more immediate human scale. I think that's a very healthy thing to have in our politics.
And last question for you here. 3-day trip to New Hampshire. A lot of people, this is perking up their eyes and ears in terms of what lies ahead for you. Are you going to be running for president in 2028?
A long way from any kind of decision like that, but I'm very happy to be here, and I know what I should be doing for the next year, which is to be there for causes and candidates that are deserving, to speak out, not just against this administration, but for the measures that are going to make it more affordable and easier to live in this state and in this country, and really proud to be doing everything I can to help make sure that leaders like Chris Pappas are elected to the U.S.